Good morning, everyone. How's everybody doing? Everybody, thank you. Good morning. How are you? Is everybody finding a seat okay? I think we have one or two up here for anybody who wants to grab a seat. We're going to jump in because, frankly, I think we have an amazing group of people here today and only 45 minutes. So we're going to do what we can. And we are a group that is committed to trying to take some questions from the audience if you guys have them. So just keep that in mind. To get started, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Ife Aduba. I'm the Executive Director of the Entrepreneurship Funders Network. We're a national network of foundations of varied sizes and shapes and types. What brings the group together is that they're all supporting entrepreneurship in the United States. They're doing it in a variety of ways, but basically start as early as pre-K all the way through the life of an entrepreneur. And so I'm really excited to be here today talking particularly about youth entrepreneurship. Part of the network is a youth entrepreneurship community of practice. We have some folks in our network who are really passionate about this. I frankly am incredibly passionate about this, and so was really excited to be invited by Kristen Fuller and folks here at GEC. So thank you to GEC, thank you to Kristen and the Started Up Foundation, and Julie Heath, who's out in the IU booth, which if you haven't visited yet, definitely visit it. Oh, she came in. I didn't think you'd make it, I'm not gonna lie. But just talk to them about what Started Up and IU are doing together. It's an amazing, amazing thing that they have developed. But so thank you for making this opportunity possible for us to bring this really cool group of people together. As a national network, I don't always get to see my funders in person, and I certainly don't get to see all the practitioners in person, and this is just a delightful mix. One of the things that we're going to try and do is make sure that everybody here gets to talk a little bit about some of their area work. If you want to go deeper, I'm really willing to bet that any one of them will talk to you after the fact. I'm hoping you're in this room because you know just how essential youth entrepreneurship and entrepreneurial education and mindset is. If you're not convinced by the end, stay seated. We'll come to you. And we'll feed more of it to you so you really understand why this is such an essential thing for a really competitive future. I'm going to jump right in and just do a quick run down the line of who you are, where you're from, for anybody who maybe can't read it on the slide. If you wonder again, who was that person, we do have it up on the slide up here. So we'll start with that, and then we'll jump into some questions and sharing some of your work.
Perfect. Hello. Hello, my name is David Coronado. I am with the Lemelson Foundation.
Hi, good morning, afternoon, where are we? Desma Dietz, I'm the Executive Director of Venture Lab. We're a youth entrepreneurship nonprofit headquartered in Austin, Texas, but national in scope.
My name is Ron Williams. I am the academic on the panel. I am an Associate Professor of Management at Coppin State University in Baltimore, Maryland, and Founding Director of the Center for Strategic Entrepreneurship.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Calvin Self, and I am a Senior Program Officer for Annenberg Tech, which is an initiative of the Annenberg Foundation that tries to get all of LA County really equitably and accessibly engaged in the tech and innovation ecosystem. So thanks for having us here.
Good morning. I'm Nadine Baker. I'm the Program Officer for Youth Engagement at the Don Wood Foundation, which is headquartered in Fort Wayne, Indiana, just a couple hours north of here. But we serve the 12 counties of Northeast Indiana, and we fund in the areas of entrepreneurship, leadership development, and advanced manufacturing.
Awesome. I have not told these guys in what order I'm going to call on them, so we'll see who's paying attention or if anyone dozes off. I am going to start with David. The Lemelson Foundation, frankly, was one of the founding foundations in the Entrepreneurship Funders Network. So we're going to kick off with David. And David, they do some great work around innovation. So David, I'm going to ask you to share a little bit about how you guys, I know you do a lot of thinking around this, about nurturing inventive and entrepreneurial ways of thinking in young people. Why do you even feel like it's important for students? Why do they need the mindset? And share a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of youth innovation.
Yeah, so a little bit about Lemelson Foundation. We really focus on improving lives through invention. So we actually approach entrepreneurship through invention-based enterprises because we see innovations as critical economy, but it's also critical to solving our current problems and our future problems, right? And we look at the entire pathway of if you're looking for innovation-driven economies and improving lives, and where does this start? And then we look at people. People are the center of solutions. I remember our founder actually talking about one of the most untapped natural resource of our century is brain power. And so we think often around how do we stimulate that brain power, that those mindsets in young people early on, because essentially every one of us is made, right? We are affected by our natural environment, by the people around us to make us who we are. And I think about that as our operating system. And oftentimes in different environments, that operating system doesn't actually get nurtured in the way that actually creates that platform to build off of. And so when we think about innovation, we think about entrepreneurship, we think about how do people need to be in order to solve big problems. I think I heard a speaker this morning talk about we just need people who walk around the world, see problems and see them as opportunities and say, I am the one who can actually solve them. And so for our work, we talk around invention education, which is looking at three components. First is identity. You can talk all about any type, whether entrepreneurship or innovation of anything, but if a person doesn't see themselves and feels confident to be that person, they're not going to be that person. So you spend a lot of time on identity formation. The second round is you hear a lot around mindsets. Some people call them soft skills. I say they are mindsets. They are the operating system of who people are. If you don't have we have mapped actually 27 critical mindsets in people. And if you map invention mindsets or inventive mindsets alongside entrepreneurial mindsets, they're actually very similar. They're similar ways of being because they are trained to think differently and to persist, to be creative, have rigor in their thinking. And so anyway, we look at that. And then the last one is skill sets. There are skill sets that people need to actually move their ideas into, whether it's an innovation or to a business. And so we spend a lot of time thinking around how do you build up talent. And so I encourage folks to think about, it's not just the skill sets. You really have to think about identity, really understand how we nurture mindsets early on from preschool all the way through adulthood. And that growth, these models do not change for whether they're pre-K or an adult. We have some folks actually have good mindsets, but actually wouldn't consider themselves an entrepreneur or inventor because they haven't developed that identity and don't feel confident to build on it. So I encourage us to think about these frameworks as you work to develop people and nurture what's naturally in there, but it takes effort to make them to have these lifelong skills.
Thank you. I'm going to jump over to you, Calvin. So in Los Angeles, right, both public and private funders have come together to fund these multi-year efforts focused on youth entrepreneurship. Talk a little bit why it's important to have those different types of funders prioritizing the issue of youth entrepreneurship and what impacts that you're seeing as a result of those partnerships and in local businesses.
So the Annenberg Foundation is a private family foundation, and in Los Angeles, we're part of an effort called the LA Teen Tech Collective. Some of you may have heard of Best Buy and their Teen Tech Center programs, which are innovation spaces, creative labs that they build all around the country and in fact the world. So back in 2021, they came to Annenberg and some folks that had funded centers in LA, and they said, LA buys the most TVs out of the country. Want to invest a little more in that ecosystem? Why don't we build 12 Teen Tech Centers all across LA County? But computer labs are cute. What are they going to do in terms of when they're all open? But how do we really connect them and students all across LA County, which includes rural areas, not just the city of LA, and really plug the youth into the entertainment and the entrepreneurship and tech ecosystem? So in 2021, we formed what we call the founding partners, which is LA County Office of Education, the Annenberg Foundation, and Best Buy. So you've got a corporate, a private, and a public funder. And I think what has really made us, because now fast forward to 2025, we have 9 out of those 12 centers built. We've been running a youth entrepreneurship program together for 3 years that helps plug people into higher education opportunities. And I think what really helped it gel is we really aligned on those shared values, not just for entrepreneurship, but for a vision for economic opportunity and development in LA. We really see entrepreneurship as a pathway to generational wealth. I don't have to tell you all the amazing stories of how entrepreneurs have changed lives for their families, job creation, communities. So we had strong alignment there. And then I think we've been able to really tap into those different strengths. Best Buy, they have that well-heeled program that is putting a center that becomes that base resource. Annenberg Foundation, we have a strong brand that's able to pull in different partners and kind of add to that. And then the LA County Office of Education gave us a lot of trust with schools and school communities, knowing that this was a vetted partnership that they could plug into. So I just want to have a small call to action. I think we need more of that. All of you know, this is a difficult time for funding with federal funding, nonprofits fundraising. We need funders to make more coalitions like this and make big bets on communities and multi-year bets, because sometimes things take a couple years to pan out and grow. So I think those have been some of the best practices we tried to take forward of remaining committed, anchoring in those values. It has not always been easy, but really staying the course to see that vision grow. And then to just the second part of your question, this is not just about youth entrepreneurship in a vacuum. We've seen in Los Angeles some really cool ways youth entrepreneurs are kicking butt with local businesses and really bringing their skills, not just in a conceptual way, but in a very real way. So there's a program called the LEAF Accelerator and Fellowship based out of Cal State LA. And this places students who are undergrads in a multi-year fellowship program where they're learning those entrepreneur skills, but then they also become embedded as a consultant within a community business like a bakery or a dry cleaner or something like that. And guess what kind of things those youth are bringing? They're bringing AI tools. They're bringing social media. So they're bringing some of the first websites these businesses have had, helping them open up sales channels. And I think that because these youth come from the local community, it's giving them a rich perspective on the entrepreneurs all around them that they build a network with. But also, those entrepreneurs have a lot of trust with these student fellows. So that's something we really want to see happen more around the country is, youth entrepreneurs, even as they're building their businesses, plugging and partnering in with community businesses around them.
Thanks, Calvin. Hi, Desma.
Hi, Iffy.
You're doing some amazing work with Venture Lab. As you know, I keep calling you to join in conversations. I'm a fan. How do you think ecosystem builders can be thinking about defining the impact metrics for youth in their planning? And what do you think really matters in terms of outcomes, especially based on your experience?
Yeah. Well, this week we've heard a lot about how do we measure the success of our efforts in ecosystem building for entrepreneurs. And in K-12 youth entrepreneurship, you need a different set of metrics, especially in the middle school area. I'm not interested in fourth graders dropping out of fifth grade to go launch their startup, right? We're not measuring jobs created yet. In fact, commercial success is secondary at that age. We are much more interested in embedding that entrepreneurial mindset that is so important, especially at middle school. You mentioned youth agency, youth purpose. Kids disengage in middle school historically with puberty and navigating new social environments. Starting younger with investing in building their confidence, investing in creativity, their curiosity, will help them come out of what can be a really difficult time in middle school. Something Julie said this morning about how if kids are coming to their freshman year already with some of these mindsets and skills developed and embedded and tested, they are in a much better position to take full advantage of the resources, the research, the mentorship that's available to them in post-secondary. So that is what we measure success as, and we have a growing data set now of, we do rigorous program evaluation to make sure, are we moving the needle in the change in mindsets, in knowledge base, in skill development, in college and career readiness. Interest in starting a business is far more important. So yes, starting early is our mantra at Venture Lab, and in fact 75% of our programs are elementary and middle school. If you want to be inspired by revolutionary business ideas, talk to a third grader and they'll blow your mind. But we try to do it in school as often as we can, but standardized K-12 learning doesn't always invite failure, right? Tests by design are to get as few wrong as possible. And at Venture Lab, we boast a 100% failure rate. We want for all of our kids to be failing and learning in a safe environment, and growing with each prototype, growing with each iteration, and building that confidence. In terms of within ecosystems, and what we've seen the most valuable partnerships come forward are through our community-based organizations. So think about your local Boys and Girls Club, think about your after-school programs or summer enrichment. Those are places where kids are feel very safe to fail, and can very easily plug into other efforts that are happening locally. In Utah, there's a craft market fair. It's called Craft Lake City in Salt Lake. And they create a kids row, which is kids farmers market and kids artisan market, where they are showcasing their wares. And in our programs, that culminating event is often that pitch event or that business fair or that farmers market signals the end of our program. But it really, for youth, it is the launching pad. It is how they begin to find their place and their power in the world when they are taking their business idea from just a nugget to, pitching it in front of a room full of grown-ups or making $25 at an afternoon sale. So those are the metrics that we are after, that change in confidence and mindset development that will pay dividends in certainly beyond the classroom and well into their post-secondary and career readiness.
Awesome. Thank you. Dr. Ron. The self-proclaimed academic, and I do encourage people to Google and find some of his work. That's how I tracked him down, is because I read this really exciting paper and then was like, I have to find this guy. But you use the phrase excellence in entrepreneurial learning in your youth entrepreneurship work. Why do you believe that this approach is going to improve outcomes? And can you talk a little bit about how this learning-centered approach relates to this accelerated pace of new and emerging economic, social, and technological realities, and could have an impact on entrepreneurship in less than a semester?
Okay. Let's see if I can do that. I want to use a phrase that David used, and sparking brain power. Okay, so, and I want to draw the ideological breadcrumbs so you can see how we've arrived at where we are. I think it was 1996, at the beginning of my full-time faculty career, that I encountered an article by David Thomas. David Thomas is the former president of Morehouse College in Atlanta, and he was at Harvard at the time. And the article was entitled "Making Differences Matter." Making differences matter. And he advocated for a learning paradigm, a learning and effectiveness paradigm. And in entrepreneurship, we hear a lot about solving problems, but really, I believe it's encountering differences, encountering the unfamiliar, and having the learning competencies so that you can find a direction when you encounter that. That is the beginning of our focus on learning. Then we encountered in 2017 a report by the Annie Casey Foundation on the youth in Baltimore. This was around workforce development. And in this 2017 study, the youth of Baltimore, because they really believe in elevating youth voices, the youth in Baltimore said, we want three things. We crave entrepreneurship. So 40% of the high school students in Baltimore say they want to be entrepreneurs. They crave entrepreneurship. They want it to be equitable. And third, they want to be able to serve their communities. Now, understanding that learning is necessary for them to be able to do that, I say if we do not do that, if we do not lean into helping them to become competent learners, then we are going to set them up for further frustration. Also, when you combine that with the fact that the National Association of Educational Progress says that only 37% of high school seniors in the U.S. are proficient in math, and only 36% of high school seniors are proficient readers in the United States, we really have to lean into learning competencies. Out of that, the Annie Casey Foundation supported the Excellence in Entrepreneurial Learning research. This is a landscape analysis of entrepreneurship instructional programs in Baltimore City for those between the ages of 16 and 29. So we asked the questions, what are the structures of these instructional programs? What's your methodology? What challenges do you have? Are you using trauma-informed approaches? Is there any engagement beyond the learning period? And what we found is that it's really the Wild West. It's all over the place. You have after-school programs, you have school-based programs, you have those that are summer programs, and there's really no rhyme or reason. So we want to get a handle on this, on the learning process in Baltimore, so that we can, one, Funders have invested a lot of money into entrepreneurship with youth. But what is your return on investment? We want to help funders get a handle on that. We want to be able to influence policy. The Excel report is a free download. It's about 60 pages. The website is greaterspacesandplaces.com. greaterspacesandplaces.com. There is an abbreviated version, so you don't have to read all 60 pages, but that's where we're headed. The Casey Foundation is continuing to support our work. After we released the study July 1 of last year, they funded a round of community conversations and also focus groups with funders, with policymakers, with capital access groups. And right now we are planning Excel 2.0, which will be a data framework so that we can begin to track the intersection of workforce development and entrepreneurship. I'll say more about that in a minute.
Awesome, thank you. Nadine. Nadine is the local funder here in Indiana with the Don Wood Foundation, and I'm hoping you can talk a little bit, and for folks who are not yet familiar with Don Wood, definitely check them out. Newer, and you've been really developing strategy and thinking very deeply about this and how it aligns with the vision of your founder over the last couple of years. So can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking of this and like this funnel design, what you mean by that, so people can understand that, how you're thinking about that, and really where you see youth entrepreneurship in that strategy?
Absolutely. So we are new. We were founded in 2018, so we're relatively new and still trying to, we consider ourselves a learning organization and trying to continue to learn and figure out what did Don mean by entrepreneurship. And I've heard several people talk about that mindset, and we have what's called a funnel, and at the very bottom is that preschool age group, and at the top is the workforce development. And Don was a visionary, and he thought, okay, I need problem solvers to work for me, right? So how do we get there, right? And it's starting with youth. When we talk about STEM or STEAM, you always talk about early and often, right? We want to give students early and often opportunities to learn, to grow their skill sets, to grow their mindsets. And we think that that's the same with entrepreneurship. How do we integrate this entrepreneurial mindset and these skills that are going to make these students successful throughout their entire lives, their entire educational career, and then beyond that? And so we know that Don was very passionate about investing in youth and giving them those opportunities to grow those things. But he also saw it as an opportunity to grow his future workforce. Somebody this morning said, a vast majority of Gen Zers now don't want to work for the man, right? They want to work for themselves. But maybe if we give them more opportunities to work with employers, to go into spaces and say, oh, I can be an innovator here, I can be a creator here, I can be a leader here, give them those connections and opportunities. We'll also build people that we need in our workforce in current openings, as engineers. We need engineers, especially in Indiana. And so how do we build those innovators and those thinkers to build our workforce and make our communities stronger and make our economy stronger?
Thank you. We're going to take questions from the audience in a couple minutes. Before we turn it over to the audience and kind of a speed round a little bit, you're sitting here in Indiana in June of 2025. You've been in this work. You've been doing it. You've been thinking about it, but you're also looking to the future. In your best dream, how does the world look different as a result of youth entrepreneurship? And what is the thing that you would want people to know about why youth entrepreneurship must be in a holistic entrepreneurship support strategy?
All right, that's a good question.
Thank you.
Well, we often think about what are the outcomes, right? And I think that's what you're asking. We are looking at resilient economies, resilient people. And when I say resilient people, there is a path for everyone in that economy. And so we look at that as the opportunity for us to really think about what's the purpose. And often I think when we talk about entrepreneurship, it's GDP, it's money. We're talking around access to a changed life and a way of happiness that improves their lives, but also together as a society, we have a stronger economy where everyone can benefit from that economy. So we spend a lot of time thinking around ecosystems and healthy ecosystems. And we work in like Kenya, for example, in the US, and we're often thinking around, that's the impact that we're wanting to see. It's not just GDP, it's about people. And how do we have that effect with the people? And for us, because we talk about mindsets, it's not whether they become an entrepreneur or whether they're an inventor, it's that they have the critical foundation, that skills that helps that individual and those societies thrive as a whole.
Yeah, that Baltimore 40% number is pretty major. I know that the most recent report around Gen Z talking about, I think 24% of Gen Zers are entrepreneurs and 21% plan to start a business in the next couple of years. So there's this great surge in entrepreneurial interest, but there's still this massive gap in access to those resources, and most importantly to the education that's going to help them be successful and effective and resilient when they are invariably not successful, because that's also how it goes. So in my dreamscape, we are better equipping this next generation to become this next generation of great leaders and creators. When you also poll Gen Z, how prepared did you feel when you got out of high school for your next career? It's pretty tragic. 1 in 2 felt that they were. So what do we need to do differently, and how much earlier and more often do we need to be intervening with and introducing opportunities for experiential entrepreneurial learning, project-based learning, and really making sure we all understand that entrepreneurial skills are employability skills, and they aren't separate, and it's not supplemental, it's not enrichment education. It's pretty essential. So that is my dream world where that narrative has shifted, and space and time and investment is created and carved out for it.
I hope that when I refer to learning competencies, I'm not just referring to the young people, but learning on every level. There's individual learning, there's institutional learning, there's organizational learning, there's societal learning. So we have to learn at the same time that those young people, those young learners, we're trying to put them in a position where they are opportunity ready. I never use the word preparing them for success. I use the phrase preparing them for opportunity readiness. I cannot guarantee success, but every time they open their eyes, they have a new opportunity. The second thing is to do it in such a way, if we're learning, we can change the trajectory of economic mobility. I do not want to be here 5 years from now, 10 years from now, having the same conversation, because the economic mobility statistics are not changing. So we have to do something that is sustainable and that we can carry forward. The third is we have been failing the young people because we have not been preparing them for the world that exists now. Now, most people do not launch as 100% entrepreneurs. They're somewhere on the continuum between 100% entrepreneur and W-2 worker. They have a side hustle, and we have not prepared them for that reality. So we have to get better at doing that, whether we call it entrepreneurship, whether we help organizations make space for those who are doing other things. However that works out, we must become better at it. That will give the young people the freedom to be explorers and really improve their economic position.
For my part, my vision would be to see some more really well-developed ecosystems. We attended an incredible breakfast this morning hosted by the Startup Education Foundation, Startup Foundation, if I quote them right. But really, we got to see, sort of how they've been taking high school students from all across the state, plugging them in with powerful university opportunities they can access as freshmen, and then surrounding them with this whole ecosystem of entrepreneurs that are really helping them thrive and grow great businesses for Indiana. And frankly, I don't think we have it figured out in quite the same way in Los Angeles. I was really jealous hearing about some of those partnerships. And I think that, sometimes if I look at LA, you see that happening on the university level where they've got their entrepreneurship center. It's kind of local, but it's really not fully integrated. And I think there's just so much more opportunity for us to invest deeply in this space for the economies of our states. And, we're, at least in the US, we like to do things in our own state and local ways. So I want to see 6 more Indianas, in other states that haven't yet kind of tapped this untapped potential. And the second thing I'd like to say is, we're all here, you're probably in this session because you take youth entrepreneurship a little more seriously. I think I'd love for us all in the next 5 to 10 years to be able to name 2, 3, 4 companies that youth entrepreneurs have scaled and exited and that are creating jobs and that are sort of, we have this trope of, the college student who quits and they go full time. No, how do we hear about the high school student who, took over and scaled a business and really hearing about it starting from that space? So I'm excited to hear about what those companies will be that will be helping build and shape our future.
Yeah, so I want to just build off, Desma just a minute ago. At the end, you said we're building essential skills. These are essential skills that everyone can utilize, no matter what age you are, and in all areas of your life. And so, at the Don Wood Foundation, we think about investing in people. We're investing in our future, right? We're investing in our economy. We're investing in people that are going to make our communities better and stronger, maybe not just where they work, but in all areas of their lives, which makes us all stronger and better. And so that is the dream, and that's where we need to go. These mindsets, these skills are just making us all better.
Thank you. I'm reminded of a phrase that I've heard multiple times. I heard it again this morning. I actually think I heard it on a call that Desma and I were both on with the Mott Foundation about how talent is universal, but opportunity is not. And I think what I really appreciate about the work that everyone here is doing is creating more opportunities and access points and pathways into this work and this education. So thank you for that. I want to call out really quickly in case anybody is sitting in the room being like, I see more faces on that, and there's somebody missing. I want to just call out really quickly Nadia Mullen, who wasn't able to join us today due to a family emergency, and the Yippee Exchange. I encourage you to look up Burton D. Morgan Foundation and Yippee Exchange. They've done some incredible work over the last several years building out this platform where you can fund resources for entrepreneurship education in schools and different programs. I think Venture Lab's actually up on that program, so you can help get it into your area. But take a look at some of what teachers are identifying as needs, and that's been, and how they've approached supporting this work. We have about 10 minutes left. We wanted to make sure to be one of the sessions here at GEC that left time for questions in case anybody had questions. And I see a microphone in the back. Questions from people. I'll get this one up here.
I work mostly with adults, but I think this probably impacts youth more. How do you see kind of the social media, TikTok, Instagram, get rich quick, it's so easy, trust me, I did it in a year, you can too. How does that impact some of the mindset work that you're working on with kids as they're thinking about entrepreneurship? Anyone have any thoughts?
It's a strong draw. The vision of overnight success has always been a strong draw. I think authentic honesty, young people always appreciate that. Keeping it real, letting them know this is hard, letting them know that it's usually not going to happen overnight. So I think that's really the key. That builds the trust when you're honest with them, that will allow you to have more influence. But I think that's where you start. It's simple.
I would just offer briefly too, I read a study, I think it was in the New York Times a couple days ago, about how young people are actually savvier consumers than we think of social media, kind of knowing what it's doing to them, how it might impact their mental health, their mood. But I think, and we talk a lot about this in the world of AI, the role of how we consume information is increasingly becoming, how are we vetting that information? How are we checking the source? And I think that, hopefully we'll see young people continue to kind of lead us into to ways of how they can kind of figure that out. Because yeah, you're going to see lots of like, just follow me and take this course. But I think young folks are a little savvier and are aware of the content they're consuming, hopefully increasingly more so. Yeah.
And I think to Ron's point, we're getting them in the door. Right? I think about Shark Tank as well. Whenever I'm talking to some baby Shark Tank, is that what you do? You know, and sure, superficially, if that's how I'm going to get you to start thinking more broadly about entrepreneurship, okay. But yes, that's just a starting point, I would say.
Hi there. I'm Catherine from the Center of Entrepreneurship at Arizona State University. And one of the biggest hurdles we see for students is the idea of failure. So from a young age, students are taught that failure is bad, whether it's grades, state testing, projects. And so you come into college and they learn about entrepreneurship and how failure is a good thing. And it's a lot easier to tell students failure is a good thing than to actually go through with it, especially now that stakes are higher with financial management, financial stability, whether it's their views on self-worth. So while I may not be able to impact the lower grades of K through 12, how can we as a university support our students while they're in the university and afterwards, especially when failure doesn't seem like an option?
The founder of Venture Lab is a Latina entrepreneur and an academic as well, and she taught entrepreneurship at Trinity University in San Antonio. And she based her curriculum for Venture Lab on the work that she was using, the same curriculum she was using in her classroom, and found that she needed to actually write instruction that she expected failure in her classroom. Because it was so difficult for them to, like you said, understand how am I supposed to, because I'm not taught to. And that was part of her motivation I need to start sooner. I need to start introducing the concept of failure and resilience and that expectation that you will much, much sooner. So for her, that was the impetus to start sooner. But even in college level, she, like I said, she was writing it into the syllabus that there will be moments within our instruction that are expected for failure.
Yeah.
I see that. I'm sorry. I see that as a faculty development, professional development issue from an institutional level, because if you're preparing your faculty with that kind of teaching philosophy, face it, the faculty have more face time with more student learners than anyone else on the campus. So it really is a professional development, faculty development issue for the teachers, for the faculty.
Now, I was just going to mention, talking about early and often, I think is what you're hearing. I think there's opportunities to create courses that adopt that, but it's also students have to have multiple experiences where they practice it and it becomes part of their DNA. I've worked with young people from early on, from sixth grade on, from high school on, but when they had multiple experiences and it becomes part of the DNA, they're less likely to be worried about that failure. And it becomes, again, part of that operating system. It's just natural to fail, but it takes a lot of experiences and reinforcement and support along the way.
I just want to say briefly, too, I think there's a connection between failure and social capital. If you have a lot of social capital and a rich auntie who can bankroll 5 businesses in a row, you feel more comfortable failing. So I think that what I really liked about what Desma shared earlier with the Venture Labs model is, are these programs creating friendly conditions to fail? And where, both folks coming into it can say, oh yeah, that business didn't work out, but they got more funding to do. So they know that if they are someone who's coming from a background with less social capital, how are they building that? And if they are, someone who's less capital resource, how does it really feel safe? Because I think that might relate to, oh my God, this is my shot. I just got that seed funding. I got to make it work, and it helps them approach that differently.
I think we're going to grab 2 last questions. So I saw a hand back there, and I have a hand over here, and everybody else find us.
I'll go first. I want to direct my question to Calvin. I absolutely love that student fellowship program that you have. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you get businesses on board for that, how you find those businesses, and how you find those students? Do you only work with universities? Just some insight on that. Thank you.
Just to share a little more color, and this is an org I partner with, so I don't help lead this, but it's called the LEAF Accelerator and Fellowship. So this really started out of faculty at Cal State LA that said we want to kind of up-level our entrepreneurship program. They came up with this cool idea for this, really intensive fellowship, this multi-year fellowship, not a quick program, something that's going to teach those mindsets and skills, and then embed the student fellows. And then they were able to form some powerful partnerships with LA County and City of LA. A lot, at least in Los Angeles, there are a lot of unspent dollars for entrepreneurs about things like digital transformation, marketing. So they said, hey, we can help you spend those budgets that go unspent year after year, because we have students that come from this local community. This happened to be some of those communities, near Cal State LA, East Los Angeles, were not having as much uptake. So they showed that they had the trust, they had the students, they did pilots, they had something called strike teams, where they just had students go talk to businesses, say, what are your needs? Let me interview you for 5 minutes, and they're like, who's this kid coming into my bakery here? But that worked. And then they were able to successfully link those public funding programs to cool opportunities for students.
Good afternoon. My name is Jamila Lodge from Bermuda Economic Development Corporation. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your insights. So my question revolves around, where do you find the students and how do you get them to participate in your programming? You have a great problem, or I guess 40%, Dr. Run, of high school students want to be entrepreneurs, but what happens when you don't have those kind of statistics to work with? How do you get the young people to want to participate in your programming? Because we know that they're the future, but sometimes they don't.
And again, this may sound like an oversimplification, but listening to the young people. They all have something that they're interested in. They all have something that they are great at. They all have that individuality. And again, I'll say about faculty development, it's helping our faculty and anybody who engages young people, even if it's in programming, to listen and look for that superpower that young person has and really create a pathway for it. Now that takes a different level of intentionality from the facilitator of learning, but I think that's the key. It's the relational competence on our side that will allow us to develop the relationship with that young people that will allow them to flourish.
One of our core values at Venture Lab is entrepreneurship is for everyone. And for kids who cannot spell the word entrepreneurship, you're not leading with that, right? You're not leading with the money that you're going to make. You're leading with the problem that in your community that you want to solve, right? And so you make it really personal to what's in their backyard, what's bothering them on campus, at their school. I mean, the smaller you can make their world, the easier it is for them to find their place in it to start. And then in the instruction and business modeling and prototyping and iterating, that all comes from this place of purpose and interest and agency in the problem that they're going to solve. So I would skip the word entrepreneurship to start and really just think about it from, how can I create value in my community? How can I solve this problem that's really bugging me? And doing that as often as possible to get kids excited about designing the future.
I'm looking at a clock that says we have 5 seconds.
The last one went over. You could do one more if you want.
She had her lip pouted out, and I really want her
There's
to...
a pout happening. She's very convincing. All right. You swayed them. Everybody give us 1 more second.
I even wrote my question so I can do it fast. Hi, I'm Romina from Peru. Nice to meet you. Thank you for this. One quote that has deeply guided me through my journey is from Ashoka's founder, Bill Drayton, which is, social entrepreneurs don't just give a fish or teach someone to fish. They aim to reinvent the whole fishing industry. So my question is, how are you each transforming that industry you are working for around this problem in your work? And what's your next biggest step or boldest dream, maybe, in driving that systemic change?
Who's got a next big step?
I can speak very briefly. My role in that in social entrepreneurship and the change I'm trying to have on the Los Angeles ecosystem is about the kinds of entrepreneurs that are included in programs. I have a big partnership we run with the venture capital ecosystem, and I don't see them as plugging into quote unquote traditional entrepreneurship programs. So there seem to be a lot of barriers where sometimes resources are gate kept on one side or the other. And I think that, it's for example, it's putting a lot of startups in situations where they're only looking at grants or accelerators, but they don't know about other loans or patient capital programs or some of the tools on the other side. So I think our role is to try to be the connective tissue so that entrepreneurs can navigate all the options in their ecosystem, all the kinds of capital in particular, and seeing that it's meant for them. So that's something that we're trying to do, is link those networks more in Los Angeles.
I will share, as you know, I've had the pleasure of meeting and spending time with all of the folks on this panel. 3 of them up here are funders that are part of the Entrepreneurship Funders Network. And frankly, I also have a big dream around youth entrepreneurship. And it is really that there is an opportunity to really look at the different strategies that each of these funders take. I think the fact that they are different strategies is what makes it really, really great, especially if we're trying to get early and often contact with youth and really grow this next generation. And so continuing to coordinate the work and effort of those funders is a big piece of what my dream is, so that we can really take kind of these model programs like what you have happening here in Indiana with Started Up and Foundation and IU, and really get this pathway that grabs them early from a variety of different places, listens to them along the way, and really supports through their whole developmental cycle. So please, please, please join me in thanking all of these folks for coming and talking with us today. Thank you so much.